Greetings, War Thunderers. This is Longshot bringing you a quick review of some of the changes in patch 1.55 as they affect arcade airplanes. This patch landed a lot quicker than most of us expected. Gaijin obviously wanted it released in time for Christmas with the first of the British ground forces, but as far as planes are concerned, this is the first patch in living memory that actually focused on Japan more than any other nation. Not only were new planes added, such as this Kai-44 Otsu, but some of the existing planes had changes to their flight models, so that's what I'll be looking at in this video. What you'll see here are the results of my late night testing after the patch dropped, so while I tried to cover as much as possible, there'll doubtless be changes that I haven't yet picked up on. By the way, 1.55 did introduce the MiG-17, but as I'm not that far progressed, I really can't give you any feedback on how that plane flies. I'll stick to the piston fighters. And also, please remember that it's early days in this patch. Things are likely to change, but all I can do is tell you what I'm seeing in the game as it is at this moment. Okay, let's get started, and I'll begin with the I-185s, both of which have had substantial flight model reworks in this patch. Okay, the one I'm flying here is the M86. The M71 has similar changes. And the first thing I'm going to note here is the WEP turning grey at around 2,700 metres. And by turning grey, it loses a lot of its power. Still provides a bit of a boost, but not as much. And that's typical of many USSR fighters. I'm not sure what the WEP grey out used to be on this plane. But even with that, it's still reaching around 3,900 metres or so after 2 WEPs, which is pretty similar to what it was before. I don't see a huge change. Still rolls at a blindingly fast speed. Still has a very wide turning circle. If you imagine a Russian version of a Focke-Wulf 190A, then that's this plane basically. It's a boom and zoomer. It's not made for turn fighting. I will try the rudder with a climbing spiral. Again, not a manoeuvre that suits this plane at all, same as it doesn't really suit Focke-Wulf 190s, but it doesn't hurt to give it a try and see what it does. And it's hard to sort of hold a climbing spiral with this plane. You can see it doesn't really want to keep climbing, it wants to turn into a flat rudder turn more than anything, and the rudder isn't really that great either. It's not much better than the elevators, if indeed it's better at all. Yeah, and even when I do manage to lift it into a climb, it's a pretty shallow one. So yeah, you don't really use this plane for dogfighting is all I'm saying there. You use it for boom and zoom, so let's see what its high-speed performance is like. Firstly, let's see how that roll speed holds up in a dive. Starting to slow down around 550. Even past 700 it's still quite fast. Really starting to grind a bit slower as it gets closer to 800, but well and truly fast enough to adjust and hit targets. And speaking of which, I'll see if I can pick off Igor here in his Fury. Rolling, adjusting, easy shot. And that's what this plane is really good at. So that's the 185s. They were great mid to low altitude boom and zoomers, and they still are. Moving right along, this is the first biplane in the US lineup. This is the F3F, and what a gorgeous little plane it is. I mean, looking at it, it basically looks like a Buffalo or a Wildcat with an extra wing on the top. And that wing provides a lot of extra lift and a lot of turning power. But firstly, let's look at its roll speed, and that's very snappy for a biplane. I don't know that there's other biplanes that can really match that. I haven't really done an extensive test on biplanes lately, but it's pretty good, and I know it's better than what the Chaika was when I last flew it. It gets inside its smoke on its turning circle, which is quite small. That's similar to most biplanes, some of which will turn faster than this, but you can do a lot more than elevator turning in a biplane, particularly when you've got a good rudder, as this biplane certainly seems to. And what's more, it can hold a pretty good low speed, fairly high angle climbing spiral. Doesn't gain a huge amount of altitude quickly because, hey, it's a biplane, I guess. But this is nice. You'll be able to defeat a lot of pilots just using this maneuver with this plane. Yeah, let's see what else it's got. Let's put into a dive, see how well that roll speed holds up at high speed. By the way, the plane is 1.7 battle rating. It has a single 50 cal and a single 30 cal. That's pretty standard for the early American fighters. Its roll speed's tightening up a bit, but it's still not bad at all. And see how well it tracks the cursor. Not much hint of an upwards bobble really at all. Excellent high-speed handling in a biplane. And yeah, climbing from about zero altitude, I think I got into the 500 km/h range there. Let's see how it goes in a zoom climb. Zoom climbing, of course, not really the best characteristics of most biplanes, and this one gets over 1,000 meters, which not bad at all considering what kind of plane it is. I think this actually might be interesting to take into a few up-tier battles down the track. So yeah, we'll see. And as you can see, it performs a hammerhead beautifully, as you'd expect something like a biplane to do. Anyway, I don't actually have this plane unlocked at the moment. It performs aerobatics, as you can see, and I'm using the reference flight model spec, which isn't the same as spaded, so the plane actually probably performs a bit better. And speaking of reference flight models, this is the A7M2, and I'm taking this out, not having yet unlocked it, let alone spaded it, so what you see here isn't quite as good as what the plane will be when fully spaded up. It reached almost 4,000 meters in the normal climb from around a 2,000 meter spawn height. Its roll rate's fairly good, can't really complain about that. Its turning ability though, however, leaves a bit to be desired. It does not turn as sharply as its predecessor, the A7M1. These two do not have the same flight model. As I kind of expected, they might actually have the same flight model, with the A7M2 having a more powerful engine, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Going into a climbing spiral, and it really wants to climb far more than it wants to turn. The rudder is okay, but not as strong as the elevators, and as you saw, the elevators weren't really that much to write home about, so the spiral is quite wide. It is holding the climb fairly well as it gets below 200 kilometers an hour, and now it's starting to flatten out. But yeah, its vertical performance wasn't bad, probably again better once it's spaded up, but not as lively, not as tight turning as the A7M1. Let's see how it goes in a dive. Is this the kind of plane that you need to fly fast and boom and zoom with? It could well be the case. So let's look at its roll speed. The A7M1 tends to lock up a fair bit above 600 kilometers an hour. It's holding up okay, gets past 700 and it's really starting to get a bit too slow now. And past 800, it's pretty bad. But it actually holds the speed quite well. It got over 860 kilometers an hour in that dive, which is pretty good. And a few maneuvers there, it didn't really drop that speed much either. And just lift it up into a vertical zoom climb. See how much altitude it can gain from pretty much zero altitude I was doing there. So as I passed 2,000, I'm still well over 200 kilometers an hour. 2,400-ish before I drop below 200. So it's a bit over 2 kilometers in a zoom climb, not bad at all. Again, probably a bit more once it's spaded up. I keep repeating myself. Let's see how it handles at an extreme low speed hammerhead, and it's extremely good. So its very low speed handling is not bad at all. The plane doesn't feel quite as good as an A7M1. Hopefully it's more powerful and it helps make up for it, because it is flying at a battle rating of 4.7. And I've seen comments on the forum from experienced pilots saying the A6M5 at the same battle rating is better. Here's another new plane, the Kai 61 Tay. And this plane, I must say, is looking like a real disappointment. That's 2 WEPs with the reference spec, and I've just got over 3,300 meters from a 2,000 meter starting point, and that is awful, considering this plane is also at 4.7 battle rating. Oh my goodness, it would to be a lot better spaded than it is as reference in order to be anything like competitive, because that is a very poor climb rate indeed. Its roll rate was mediocre. Kai 61s used to roll fast and no longer do. Its turn rate, nothing great there. BF109s will outturn you, and outturn you easily, as will Spitfires, using elevators anyway. But then Kai 61s have always been more about the rudder than the elevator, and the rudder is fairly good, not as good as I remember some of the earlier Kai 61s being, and it doesn't really want to climb in this climbing spiral either. That's gaining a little bit of altitude, but goodness, it's pretty shallow. I must say, on what I'm seeing here, this plane does not impress me, and sure, it might be better when spaded up, but I'm not going to hold my breath. But what I can say from this is that grinding it up from stock will be an extremely painful experience. Now, this plane is armed with a couple of Ho-5 cannon, as distinct from the Hay, which is armed with a couple of German 150-120s. Ho-5s are decent at close range, and these are mounted in the nose, but they're much worse at longer range because they don't have as much high explosive. Look at that horrible roll rate lock up at high speed. My goodness, the high-speed handling on these planes used to be great. Now is not. Look at that bobble up as I try to pull to the side there, and the bleeding away of speed as well. Yeah, I mean, I think the Hay, even before this patch, it was clearly being well outperformed by the likes of BF109 F4s, which are tiered quite a bit lower than them now. I think, yeah, the higher Kai 61s are well over tiered, and either need better flight models or they need to be dropped down. Anyway, I did see comments on the forums and elsewhere, maybe on Reddit, I can't remember, I've been doing a lot of reading lately, saying that the Hay has also suffered a nerf to its climb rate. So let me just check that out quickly. Here it is, took it out in the test flight, and I'm approaching the end of the second WEP. And you can see it's a lot higher than what the Tay got to. Yep, I'm reaching 4,000 meters, and that's what it got to in the previously. I don't see any real change there. If you're used to how the Hay flies prior to this patch, it doesn't really seem to be much different. Getting my testing order all wrong here. I'm into a climbing spiral, and you see how much sharper that was there than what the Tay was doing. This plane is a lot livelier, wants to climb a lot better. So yeah, the Hay looks like a far superior plane to the Tay. I just wouldn't bother with the Tay, to be honest. And that brings me to the Ki 43 Mark III Otsu. Yes, the Cannon Busa. Because this plane has had a flight model alteration again for about the 7th time since it was introduced. I am just hitting the end of the second WEP period, and look at my altitude. It used to be about 4,500 meters, now I'm barely getting up past 4,100. Maybe 4,200 meters if I manage my speed just a little better, but it cannot climb as well as it used to. It's lost about 300 meters in its climb rate. Which may not seem like a great deal, but its climbing ability from spawn was one of its real assets, and it has been cut back on what it used to be. And so has its turning ability. That circle is wider than it used to be, and it no longer quite catches its smoke trail. Used to overlap it quite handily. In fact, in my testing, it could even outturn a Canon Chica. Forget that now. The Canon Chica will outturn you easily, as will a Zero, as will, under certain circumstances, a Spitfire. With combat flaps, does it improve things? No, it still can't catch a smoke trail. Maybe the circle's a little bit smaller. Yeah, basically that part of this plane's performance has suffered a rather major nerf. Looks to me like the amount of lift from the wings, in arcade at least, has been cut back. And that's affected both its climbing ability and its ability to turn into a climbing spiral. And this was one of this plane's real strengths before. It would climb in a spiral very steeply and maintain it even at very low speeds for almost as long as you wanted to. Now it's a very shallow climbing spiral, even with combat flaps. It just does not want to go up. Yeah, that's taken away quite a major aspect of the plane's, what made this plane really good, its vertical performance. Yeah, let's see how it goes in a dive. Maybe that's been improved, I don't know. It was never a really good boom and zoomer. I mean, it could do it to a limited extent, but mainly because it just didn't get fast enough in a dive. And if it's not that fast in a dive, it won't be able to zoom climb that far either, so it made it vulnerable. Its roll speed is holding up fairly well, I must say. Much better than the Kai 61s, in fact. Although, as you can see, it's only barely getting over 700 kilometers an hour. Let's see if I can pick off this Fury. Yeah, no problem. And I'll pull up into a zoom climb. My speed was already getting down into the low 600s, and that's the problem when you use this as a boom and zoomer. It will regain, I don't know, maybe about 2 kilometers before it drops below 200. Again, I didn't really know what my altitude was, but I think it's a bit less actually. And again, we'll see how it goes in a very low speed hammerhead. I expect this to be pretty good. See if I can hit that Nimrod that's followed me up. It's a bit sloppy, but not bad, and I'm aiming too short. That's not the plane's fault, that's my fault. Okay, I'll perform one more test before I move along, and that'll be the, I haven't done it right here, that'll be the consecutive Immelmans. Now, it used to be able to pull as many of these as you wished before. Let's see if it can still do it, and my betting is that it can't. Again, because its vertical performance has been cut in this patch. It's managing the second one okay, but on the third one it'll get extremely close to stalling and take a long time to perform it. So yeah, the plane is not what it was. what can you use it for? Well, you can still, I think, dogfight with it to some degree. It just won't be as good, and you're going to get shot down a lot more often than you used to. To me, I think the plane's actually a little bit over-tiered now at 4.3. But time will tell. Maybe they'll reverse the change or give it another flight model that'll restore it to its former glories. And speaking of glorious, this is the new Kai 44 Otsu. Rather strange looking planes, these Kai 44s. Tiny fuselage except for where the engine is, where it bulges right out. Tiny little wings. Everything about the plane is small except the engine, which seems oversized for it, and indeed the engine was not the one originally planned for the plane. It was retrofitted afterwards, so it's amazing the plane was as successful as it was. This plane is built for speed. Look at what speed I'm doing. I've climbed well above 3,000 meters on the first WEP, and I'm doing over 290 kilometers an hour. I better get away from that AAA. And as I continue to climb at high speed, it will get me over 4,200 meters. And I haven't really done any testing to see what the optimum climb speed is on these planes right now, but for a plane at a battle rating of 2.3, that is phenomenally good. And it's completely useless at that battle rating because how much action actually happens at these kind of altitudes. At a battle rating of 2.3, very, very little. So the very first thing I'd suggest doing in this plane is up-tiering it. Now the Otsu is, of course, the premium one they just introduced with 40 mil cannon, one in each wing, and I'll get to those in a minute. Its roll rate is pretty snappy. Its elevator turning is not great because the plane is not a dogfighter. It is an energy fighter and a boom and zoomer. Think of this as the Japanese I-185. Let's see how it goes with a rudder turn though. In the previous version of the Kai 44 that's already been in the game, the Ko, the rudder was much stronger than the elevator, and that's proving the case with this as well. I don't remember the Ko being this fast though, because this plane is mighty quick. It's taking a long time even to drop speed in a climbing spiral, and it is actually managing to climb. I'm still well above 200 kilometers an hour, and I've been going at this for quite a while. It really does not want to go slow, this plane. Okay, so given that the plane's fast, let's see how it goes in a boom and zoom test. I actually had to perform this a second time because the first time I accidentally did it with combat flaps still on, which was pretty silly on my part. Okay, into the dive we go. See how well the roll speed holds up. Starting to slow down just a little. Still fairly good. Yeah, it's workable above 700 kilometers an hour. Starting to get slow now as I approach 800. Can I manage to get guns on this Fury? You bet. And boom, down it goes. Now if you look closely, you'll notice I actually fired 2 shots from the cannon then. Their rate of fire is incredibly high, but you don't actually hear the noise twice, you only hear the noise once. There's a bit of a bug with the sound there. Maybe there's a bug with the speed of the cannon fire as well, I don't know, but it's very hard to conserve ammunition with the cannon in this plane. As far as its zoom climb is concerned, I just passed 200 kilometers an hour and I've regained a huge amount of altitude. I didn't measure exactly how much it was, but this plane has an excellent zoom climb. Let's see how well it goes. In a very low speed hammerhead, it's a bit sloppy. Maybe when I hammerhead over at a bit of a higher speed, and there we are, the cannons wrecking targets once again. So this is a plane to be flown fast, and because you have a lead indicator and you have air reloads, those cannon can be absolutely deadly, provided you get a decent aim at the profile of the plane you're firing at. Sitting on someone's tail, I would not recommend. And yes, I did take this out. I had time to take this out in a quick battle before I went to sleep at 3 o'clock in the morning or something ridiculous, and noted at its incredible climbing speed. I'm up at 5,000 meters after 3 WEPs, I think that was, and I'm still traveling at some absurd speed, 300 kilometers an hour. It doesn't slow down at high altitude. Really, the flight model in this plane is good enough to compete at a battle rating of 4.0. It does not belong at 2.3 by any stretch of the imagination. Let's see if I can nail this A6M2, who's completely unsuspecting of the death swooping on him from above. Just a quick volley, and boom, there he goes. Rank does not matter. No, it does not matter at all. This G4M1 wants to outclimb me, and with the speed of this plane and its zoom climbing abilities and its energy retention, there's no way in the world he's going to outclimb me. I don't know if it's strictly speaking energy retention. It could just be the absurd power to weight ratio or something like that. Again, I'm just tapping the key there and it sends out a whole volley of shells. It's very hard to avoid. And yeah, nothing's going to survive contact with that burst of death that this plane produces. So, what else came apart from new planes in this patch? Well, there actually were a couple of other planes I haven't mentioned. The British got the short Stirling bomber. The Germans got another Junkers 88 bomber. So a couple of easy targets have been added to the game as far as I'm concerned. There are no new maps, there's no new changes to game modes. All of the effort on that side of thing, Gaijin are putting into ground forces still. I can only hope that at some point they come back and look at planes and give this side of the game a bit more love. But really, from the point of view of planes, this patch was a fairly minor one. And as much as they gave with the new Japanese planes, they took away with the changes to flight models as well, particularly to the Cannon Busa, which is leaving me feeling rather sad. But there's plenty of other planes in the game to fly. Speaking of which, I'll be unlocking and flying that F3F as quickly as I possibly can because it just looks like a barrel of fun. Anyway, that's all I have for this video. I hope you found it helpful, and please leave your comments. I'll be happy to read them. Until my next vid, this is Longshot signing off, and I'll see you in the skies.